acknowledges the implementation of creative and innovative solutions during the execution of development projects funded by the IDB Group in Latin America and the Caribbean. Superheroes of Development works as a platform, knowledge platform, where operations can be fed back into good practices. And thus we promote operational excellence of projects, and we automate the learning and the lessons learned in order to share them with other executing agencies and clients that might be interested in facing the same challenges. Many times Superheroes saves the world without anybody knowing. With the Superheroes of Development, we want to stress and highlight the effort and commitment of those who work for the well-being of so many people in the region. In 2022, we received 77 proposals from 23 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. A panel of experts from the different sectors in the IDB Group selected 7 finalists that participated in 2 categories: projects that are currently in the execution phase and projects that have been completed as of January 2016. The finalists participated in a virtual event where they presented the projects before top management in the IDB Group that selected the 4 winners. One program in Colombia that was able to digitize 100% of its activities during the pandemic, thus having execution percentages of procurement to be higher than usual. A technological solution that might seem to be old-fashioned, but it had education and learning programs that were brought to households with a low connectivity in Mexico, a solution based in nature that protected Trinidad and Tobago from landslides, floods, and last but not least, a wind park that was supported in a chain of payments and collections to turn them into minority shareholders in Uruguay. Welcome to this conversation of the Superheroes of Development 2022, a space to learn firsthand and get to know our superheroes. Very good morning and welcome to this conversation of the Superheroes of Development. Our Interim President, Reina Irene Mejía, will talk to the 4 winners of this 5th edition. We have interpretation into English and Spanish. If you wish to switch the language, we will include the links to the different languages on the chat.
For the links we will place in the chat to access them. Adelante, Reina Irene.
Muchas gracias, María Elena.
Thank you very much, María Elena. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this conversation with the winners of the 5th edition of the Superheroes of Development, an initiative that I personally love and that makes me very proud. It is precisely through this initiative that we recognize and acknowledge the hard work carried out by our executing units in order to bring to fruition the projects that we carry out as the IDB Group. We know that many times executing units, ranging from public entities to private stakeholders, face obstacles that seem impossible to overcome. That is why we acknowledge them and we consider them as superheroes of development. Talking about challenges and solutions is vital because it is from there that we can extract lessons and experiences that can benefit other projects as well as other countries. At the same time, it allows us to design and to implement better projects, and thus to be able to move forward towards operational excellence that, with determination, we're all working on it. And by operational excellence, we mean efficiency and effectiveness in our operations in order to attain the proposed development objectives. The executors of a new program, for example, can design and implement it more effectively and efficiently if they know the path that someone else has traveled. Thus, they will be able to foresee challenges that others have already faced, and they may even avoid mistakes that others have made in the past. These are the so-called lessons learned that are so much talked about in the development world, and which precisely today we want to highlight and disseminate to all these cases that will be presented today. These are truly exceptional cases. These are our superheroes. And it is in this sense that Superheroes of Development is more than a contest. It is a knowledge, a platform of lessons learned that we promote from the IDB Academy. Today, it is a great pleasure for me to talk to 4 superheroes, the 4 winners of this edition, from amongst a total of 77 cases from 23 countries that applied. 23 countries that applied. And as you may hear, these are fascinating stories, not only because of their excellent results, but because of the difficulties they faced and that were successfully overcome.
Let's start with Trinidad and Tobago. It is an interesting case because the biggest challenge they faced was skepticism. Yes, you heard it. Skepticism. They wanted to use grass, a nature-based solution to prevent the landslides and floods that every year affect the inhabitants, not only of Trinidad and Tobago, but a lot in the region, the entire region. We are not talking about any type of grass, but about a very particular one that extends its roots up to 3 meters below the ground, and that due to its characteristics prevents erosion and soil instability. The problem is that people weren't so sure that a simple plant, even if it was a cheaper alternative, would be as effective as retaining walls or other concrete and steel-based solutions. We are going to talk precisely about this with Jonathan Barkan, who, as technical director and chairman of IAM movement, had to face the disbelief of all the people. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to this conversation.
Hello, Reina. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Same here. Can you please share how does this type of grass work, and how did you and your team convince people of its usefulness?
Sure. Well, it seems like you know everything already based on your comments just now, and I'm really happy that you were able to get the full picture of what we've been doing here. But really and truly, as you said, it's a very unique plant species because the roots grow up to 10 feet deep in the first 2 years, where most other plant species and grass species, the roots grow just 1 to 2 feet deep, They've also done a lot of studies on this plant to see that the roots are also like 5 to 7 times as strong as other grass species. And it has a lot of history in this part of the world, actually. It's a very multi-use plant. The roots are also used to make essential oils and perfumes. And Haiti actually used to be the second biggest producer of this essential oil in the world. So it's just to say that it's really been here for quite a long time, but that knowledge was lost, So it is almost like ancestral indigenous knowledge that was really lost. I mean, I personally believe in development. We've made a lot of strides, obviously, in the last 30, 40 years. But I think we also got very excited by man-made solutions all the way and thinking that this was the only way. And I think we've kind of recognized on all fronts, that reconnecting with nature is very important for us to protect our world, our climate, all of that. But so really and truly, I guess, the way that we did it was, it is an engineering tool. So we had to present the technical sort of reality of it, showcasing international cases as well. But as you said, even though it's cost effective and people are very interested in it, they're still a bit skeptical. So, what we did was we would actually, with the private stakeholders, we would sort of let them approach us, indicating their need, their concerns, because anybody who's facing a landslip, whether it's public works on a roadside or a commercial project, etc., they, have a serious problem they're facing, and they're receiving quotations which are very high for steel and concrete walls. So what we would do is really, it took a lot of work, but little by little try to increase the case studies we had in Trinidad and Tobago, recognizing that people really needed to see local cases. And also, as they were sort of gaining that interest, what we did and the project, the Building on Vetiver IDB Lab project really allowed us to do was to be able to come in and give them a bit of extras to say, listen, sure, if you're willing to invest this amount, because they're telling us that, they're willing to invest something, but, we're going to take it the next step. We're going to guarantee this solution by taking care of it for 2 or 3 years of maintenance and that type of thing. So they were really, really able to see that we were committed to their success. And that, I think, played a really important role in them recognizing that, we're not just going to try something and it's going to fail. We're going to be there until it succeeds. And that is really, I think, what got a lot of stakeholders on board, such that the project, throughout the whole project period, we had about 100 partners. So yeah, I guess that was really kind of how we managed to get persons on board in Trinidad.
That's amazing, Jonathan. And you mentioned 100 partners, but tell us, how were you able to mobilize from these counterparts exceeding expectations for more than 5 times? That's amazing. I mean, it is amazing. People really believed in what you guys were doing, that it was going to be successful. How did you manage to bring 5 times? That's not an easy outcome.
For sure. So, I mean, with the private stakeholders, I mean, it was once again a matter of them needing the solution and therefore being willing to invest. And they already had a large amount of money put aside, probably to put into a retaining wall or rock basket. So we were able to, as long as we gave them the confidence, to get them to buy in as well. But also, very importantly, we recognize that this solution, while it's good for private and commercial projects, it's also incredibly important for communities as a development solution. Because this little plant, if communities know how to use it properly according to the vetiver system, they can take this to protect their roads, homes, infrastructure, etc. So what we did is we developed a very unique model. It's called the Vetiver Education and Empowerment Project Model. And it's really a model that allows us to take this solution to any stakeholders interested. This could be private, but it can also be government. It can be other NGOs and that sort of thing. So because of that model of us being able to take it to communities and to introduce it and to create livelihoods and to protect people's homes, roads and houses and that sort of thing, we were actually able to get great support from our government of Trinidad and Tobago through their Green Fund to scale up, where we're doing it nationally now across Trinidad and Tobago. It's the first country at the national level promoting the vetiver system as a green infrastructure and climate resilience tool. But also regionally, we got support from the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund to take this to 4 more countries. And now the United Nations Democracy Fund is also allowing us to touch a bit on Guyana and Suriname. So I guess it's really that community model of recognizing that this solution should be available to everyone. The Vetiver Education Empowerment Project, or VEEP model, I think that played a really significant role in us being able to get a lot of this very interesting stakeholder buy-in that led to us getting that 5 times amount that you mentioned there.
Wow, what an amazing nature-based project. Congratulations, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you.
And before you go, I just want to tell you that there is no coincidence. We are here at the IDB Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., and we have an exhibition from an artist from Trinidad and Tobago. So
wonderful.
Just wanted to tell you that I'm surrounded beautiful art, and one of that is from Trinidad. So thank you very much.
Would love to see that exhibition. That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Ahora hablemos de
And now let us talk about our next project in the state of Tabasco in Mexico. They decided to give tutorship to students from low-income households. Due to coronavirus and the confinement, these students stopped attending classes, and they lost the ability to perform mathematical operations that they could previously execute, such a simple division, just to mention an example. And the tutorship was done by phone in order to reach these households without an internet connection. The problem that arose was that when they called, the families were suspicious. They mistrusted the calls. So fathers, mothers thought that this was a scam, and several times they simply hung up the phone. In many other cases, telephone numbers were outdated and they did not correspond to the students' homes. This story, with such a challenge, will be told by Felipe Jose Evia Madero, a visiting scholar at Harvard University and researcher professor at CIESAS in Mexico. Welcome, Felipe. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Tell us, How do you do a tutoring program over the phone when families don't even answer the phone? Hello, it's a pleasure. Well, the fact that is quite difficult, and we needed several ingredients. On the one hand, and this was the main lesson that we learned in this very complicated process. The first thing is that we needed the support of school communities. That is to say, the support, the follow-up by the communities before, during, and after the program is essential. As Reina was saying, in many places in Latin America, the phone is a viable option in order to communicate with the population, much more so in those remote areas that are not connected to the internet or rural areas. In Mexico, less than 50% of the population has access to the internet, and more than 90% has phones. So it is very attractive to use the phone as a means to reach them. However, the phone is also an important source of mistrust. There are a lot of scams, a lot of extortion problems, insecurity. And what is important here is to develop confidence. We had to generate this confidence so that these tutorships were not only a scam, but on the contrary, they wanted to help children, boys and girls that need it the most. Needed this support after having the schools closed for so long. And so we discovered something that seems to me very obvious, but in the past it was not automated. And it is that it is essential to get together with the communities in order to create certainty in context of such high uncertainty. And you know very well, in the IDB, you just published the general report on confidence. Confidence is essential, and confidence in the education sector is placed in the hands of teachers and deans and principals in schools. That is why it's important to resort to them to help each other so that we will be able to reach more boys and girls with this program. But the other important ingredient has to do with the selection and the training of tutors. They have to be committed with a project. They made the calls. They were able to communicate to parents and explain the situation to these parents. And there's a third ingredient that I believe is essential: to have a committed work team, committed with a project. And we have a top-of-the-line work team. I don't want to go on without mentioning them in this public space. Aris Mendez, the leadership, Hernandez, Carlos Macias, our director in this process, that we believe is essential. Thank you very much. It is truly impressive, and there's something that really strikes me very much from this story, that a communication tool such as the telephone that many might consider now as outdated or anachronistic becomes such an important instrument in order to bring learning to those who do not yet have access to the internet. So I want to know, how were people receiving these remote tutorials by the students? If it has really been difficult for the children to receive classes through a computer, I cannot imagine what it is like to receive classes on a phone. Tell us a little bit about this, Felipe, and the mathematical learnings that are being recovered. It is truly impressive. Yes, in fact, one of the most exciting things and impressive things for us in the project were the results of polls. When we asked children, 99.9% of the children said that they were very happy with these courses and they wanted to continue with these tutorials and not only put an end to the project, but to move forward. And the same thing was said by the parents of the children. We believe that this has to do with the fact that the program has two secret ingredients that make it different and very attractive for the children, for their families, and for the tutors. First of all, we promote the relation with the tutor. During the pandemic, outside the pandemic, it's important to feel supported, that you're being heard, to receive attention. And that's an essential part of the process of the learning and teaching process. If we don't bring excitement into this, we don't learn. And tutors have shown precisely that they can deliver this support, personalized, one-to-one support, introducing yourself before someone, which is so important for the educational issue. And another secret recipe besides this relation with the tutors is that we worked on a project with a very powerful pedagogical principle that is teaching at the right level. What this program does is that it identifies the children not by school level, but by effective learning grade. And with that, it ensures that children can work on the basis of what they really know and not on what they should know because they're 15, 16, 18, or 9 years old, but what they really know. And that they move forward. And therefore, children feel safer, much more secure that they can undertake mathematical activities that they are working on. And we work specifically with additions, multiplications, division, subtraction, something very simple. But because of the speed with which the curriculum moves on, teachers just take it for granted that they've seen that then the children don't have a possibility, particularly those that were not able to go to school because the schools were closed, and to go back and learn these issues. So the tutorials have been very helpful, showing with impact assessments and also quantitative assessments that we solve a problem in a very simple way and in a cheap way, but that in fact it does have an impact not only on the present, but it has an impact on the future. The possibilities for children to drop out of school if they don't learn math are higher. And if they keep going to school, they will have a better future and a better present. And that's the purpose of this project. Outstanding, truly outstanding, Felipe. Thank you very much. And congratulations for this project with which you decided to contribute to educational equality in the region. In fact, I fully agree with you in saying that the basis must be there. It is math, and it's a huge challenge, and you were able to do it. You in Mexico and Jonathan's team in Trinidad and Tobago are examples of these projects that today are currently being implemented and from which we can already draw important lessons. And now let us hear two other stories, but these have to do with initiatives that have already completed their operations. One of these cases is that of the controller of Colombia. They were advancing in an institutional strengthening program to be more effective and efficient in fiscal control until the pandemic and confinement measures arrived.
The entire operation of the executing agency ran the risk of having their processes stopped entirely, in addition to the function of the comptroller's office, which at that time were still very paper dependent and depended very heavily on people undertaking their processes in an in-person format. Nevertheless, against all odds, they were able to implement more than 99% of the allocated resources for 2020. And this is an impressive result because this is already an important achievement for any type of project, even without a pandemic. So achieving something like this during a pandemic is really remarkable. With that, I'd like to yield the floor to Juan Carlos Ospina, manager of the executing agency of the program that made this achievement happen. Tell us, Juan Carlos, what did you face during the pandemic and how were you able to manage this excellent execution? Well, good morning, Madam President. Thank you very much. It is truly an honor for the Comptroller's Office in Colombia to be able to share this time with you to share some of the lessons learned with other colleagues in the region, and we congratulate all of the teams. As you mentioned, we were facing a complete paralyzation of activities and all the time that this confinement would be in place. And so what we did was to act immediately from the Comptroller's Office standpoint and think about the different ways that we could digitalize our efforts and processes. As you stated, prior to the pandemic, all of our processes were primarily in an in-person format and on paper. So one of the first steps we took was get away from the paper, and we started to conduct other types of interactions outside of the in-person format. So we started using online platforms and tools to be able to undertake these processes, including audiences. we undertook some procurement processes through some of these virtual platforms. We also developed the digital application, which previously was non-existent. And this was something that we consulted with the bank to be able to ensure proper execution. We also came up with novel processes to be able to digitalize all of these financial and planning elements. Everything was transitioned to the digital realm. We did not go back to producing a single piece of paper after that. And at present, we are undergoing another phase with the Comptroller's Office, and we were the first agency to do this. Now, in the midst of all of this, we clearly looked at our planning. We also focused on the longer term contract processes. We undertook a very detailed process with different stakeholders. When the longer term processes were underway, in accordance with our installed capacity, we were able to close with certain procurement processes in the procurement of certain assets. And at the same time, we tried to be very careful with the planning that we were using and applying to these processes. And this allowed us to close the year with an execution rate of 99%. And the success rate for the projects was on the order of 97%. So notwithstanding the presence of the pandemic, we managed to acquire a great deal of progress in all the projects. And this was something that we were able to do using digital means. And we subsequently expanded this to other areas. And that was the core of the experience. What you're talking about, Juan Carlos, is fascinating, especially because you became an inspiration for the rest of the Comptroller's Office. So it wasn't just a unit that met their execution goals, but also the office managed to achieve many of the objectives that they had set for itself. So that's incredible. And I need to say that to a certain extent, the pandemic kind of pushed us towards technology, and we can't look back anymore. Talk to us, Juan Carlos, about the improvements that you've made in the Comptroller's Office as a consequence of this strengthening program and the increase of citizen participation in terms of fiscal controls. Well, we set to organizing and modernizing the Comptroller's Office in Colombia in 2016, and the idea was to conduct this 5-year program. And so far, we worked with 4,500 officials, and creating change, bringing about change was very challenging and difficult. So during the first 3 years, we were able to transform many things. But for example, between 2016 and 2019, the agency was able to meet its goals with regard to international audit standards. So we went from a 1.5 to a 3 rating in our audit process, and it acquired the highest rating in the region in terms of the audit quality. And this is something that was based on an international rating. Additionally, we established a Comptroller audit quality improvement process region-wide. Additionally, this included a very heavy component of citizen participation. And one of the challenges of the transition to digital technology during the pandemic made it necessary for us to drive forward initiatives that were web-based so that any person could report any acts of corruption, any mistakes. They also had the capability to send audio recordings or videos of any of activities that they wanted to report. And so we saw an increase on the order of 200% for these claims and reports of illicit activities on our website. And we had to ensure the best access conditions for people to be able to submit this report. Additionally, we also adopted very important transparency formulas. We went to an open data approach for the agency, made all the public information available through the website, and we focused on fiscal responsibility. So we undertook a number of tangible and intangible processes. We focused on procedural issues, technology tools. We did extensive capacity building among public servants. We also engaged in extensive improvements for change management. So all of this was supported while keeping an eye on the objectives. So the project really served to improve the processes for the entire organization. And so we saw that the efficiency levels during the course of this project achieved a rating of 3.4 and met seven specific objectives in different entities in Colombia with the IDB's support. So when we undertook this project in strengthening operations for the Comptroller's office in Colombia, we were able to ensure that success. Now, we did focus primarily on the digital transition, and that served to be the key for the entire process. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Thank you. And once again, congratulations to you and your team members. It's very gratifying to see how teams can actually meet their execution expectations, even under extreme adverse conditions, such as those posed by the pandemic. Now, moving on to the last participation, also a winner of the Development Superheroes Prize. We have Lourdes Vaz, General Manager of Arreafin, in representation of the Valentines Wind Power Farm. This was a project that worked with the Uruguayan electrical grid. And at present in Uruguay, they are a leading company in renewable energy, and they are also considered a leader for the entire region. When they considered the project, they determined that they needed to find resources beyond those that the largest investors could offer. So they decided to invite citizens in general to add themselves to the project as minority shareholders. Now, to do this, they have faced a number of challenges. In addition to the capitals market not being sufficiently developed for this effort, it also proved to be difficult to turn this into something that you could trade in the stock exchange. So this led to creative solutions to ensure that Uruguayan citizens could buy shares in any neighborhood or town to contribute to this project. And they made it happen. Hello, Lourdes, and welcome. Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see you and your team members, notwithstanding that we see you virtually. Thank you very much. We decided to join in as a team to support this opportunity to contribute to this discussion. It's a real source of pride for us to receive this recognition. I'd like to present Engineer Silvia Mal, the chairman of UTEL, Javier San Cristobal, the general manager of UTEM, and they played a key role in this challenging process. Jose Aren, directors, accountant Gonzalo Perez and Analí Rodriguez, the Arreafin, and part of the team that worked on the project, Aniela Olapa. Thank you for this opportunity. The beginning of the project for us was very satisfying, and I'd like to yield the floor to Jose Andrés, who's going to share some insights since we are a team, and he's going to talk about this road that we've traveled. Thank you, Lourdes, and thank you to the team members. We'd like to hear from you and ask what it was that you did and what was the contribution of this wind farm to the transformation in the energy sector in Uruguay. Please go ahead, and it's a pleasure to see you all. Thank you very much, Madam President. With this presentation, the team collectively wishes to convey this teamwork concept, which was necessary for us to undertake this process. What we really want to highlight here is that both Silvia and Javier represent the public electricity provision company in Uruguay. Gonzalo Reyes represents the minority shareholders, and we are part of a board representing UTE and the private sector. Silvia Brinat, the president of UTE, was previously the secretary of this group. This story goes back a number of years. I'd say it goes back to 2003, 2004, and it stems from a crisis that we had. We were having trouble in Uruguay meeting energy demands, especially on the basis of hydropower, which was at full capacity. We didn't really have any more capability to exploit that form of energy generation. So we had to resort to hydrocarbons. But in 2010, we had a meeting that involved all the political parties, and we decided to undergo the first transformation at that time. And we undertook a couple of rounds. In the first one, we incorporated renewable energies. We had a huge gap to close with energy demand, and we didn't have enough money to undergo that transformation. So we went to the private sector for private investment, and we were fearful of setting up a monopoly in the private sector. So we needed to address the challenges with imagination and creativity. Ariafin is a private enterprise that is supervised by the public sector, and the public component is a minority shareholder. But as an example, I could tell you that over the last 4 years, we've gotten many awards in various surveys ascertaining the levels of trust by the general citizenry. The participation or the share of the organization is up to 20%. So it was necessary to incentivize the private sector to take part in this project, but we didn't want one or two large investors from the private sector. And we decided to open access to all Uruguayans to take part in this venture as investors. And this was done in a very challenging way. We used to compare this to a scene in the movie Titanic with the accompanying soundtrack, but we established a great deal of work. We conducted some awareness, set up a technology platform, understanding that not all people nationwide had access to adequate online service. So we reached out to many rural areas and younger towns in Uruguay, and we offered the participation to citizens to take part in the investment process of up to $1,000. In some cases, we had investors that contributed amounts as low as $100. Now, we had majority shareholders that invested as much as $20 million. So when we put out the bid for investors, we got an extensive amount of interest, and this led to the construction of the wind farm. This, of course, was undertaken with the support of the IDB, and the park itself is the second largest in Uruguay. So in Uruguay, we had incorporated 1,500 megawatts of wind power, and this park has a 70 megawatt capacity. It's the second largest project of its type in Uruguay. I told you that the board is made up of the UTE and the private sector, but we had two private sector representatives and one from UTE. And we answer to shareholders. Sometimes this is not an easy task because they have many questions, but we try to ensure full transparency and keep everybody informed of what was happening. So the wind farm, proportionally speaking, within that 1,500 megawatt range, contributed primarily in two spaces: to, one, ensure energy independence for Uruguay. There are days in which supply does not meet the demand, and this is something that we can cover with renewables, so we don't have to resort to the use of any fossil fuels. This is something that's very important from the environmental standpoint, but more importantly, the transformation that we undertook, especially in the building of this wind farm, was to be able to supply demand and generate cost reductions for electricity in our country from 1.4 billion to 700 million. So this led to two things. It allowed us to maintain rates below inflation levels. And additionally, that savings can be reinvested in other things, such as rural electrification, so that people wouldn't have to travel long distances from what we call settlements or small towns or villages. For many in the country, it was very important to integrate every corner of the region to capitalize on other opportunities for development. Access was also very important, and we also achieved a decarbonization on a very high order. So if we were able to try to meet demand with fossil fuels, at this time we would be generating 80% more than what we could be doing at the present time with renewable energy. Now, we are subject to audits by the Ministry of the Environment, and this considers everything, wildlife, rivers, and everything. As we say in Uruguay, shareholders that contributed $100, $200, or what have you, the dividends were dispersed on the order of 10%, which is not something that you can get with any regular bank. Additionally, the stocks are always traded evenly. Now, I could tell you a lot more about the program, but I don't want to take up any more time than what we've been allotted, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much. Really very impressive and very encouraging. You faced a tremendous challenge, but you achieved great results. Something that I'd like to highlight about this project, it's something that could serve as an example for the rest of the world. And I'm talking about what you just mentioned, Uruguayan citizens. When they invested their savings in the building of this wind farm, they are contributing directly with their own efforts to the fight against global warming, and they are fighting to support the objectives outlined in the Paris Agreement. What you mentioned previously, I know you gave us a general overview about the overall reduction in CO2 emissions, and in fact, how you've brought about a substantial reduction in energy costs in your country. This is extremely impressive, and I congratulate you and I encourage you to continue being an example for others at this time where we all need to contribute in order for us to be able to make our planet something better. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is really a very inspiring project. Now I'd like to ask all four superheroes, if you had to highlight one single lesson that you would share with all the other executing agencies in the region, what lesson would you choose to share? And I'm going to give you each 1 minute. I have you all on camera. I see you all now. I would love to hear a lot more, but given that we have limited time, I would like to ask you to tell me in 1 minute, in the same order that we had you speak, Jonathan first, Felipe, then Juan Carlos, and then the team from Uruguay. Go ahead, Jonathan. Thank you very much, Reina. I will answer in English, of course.
Just to say that, yeah, I think that the biggest lesson learned was definitely really the importance of when we identify partners we work with, inviting them to take lead. Because at the end of the day, it's their projects. So we are bringing solutions to them, but it's really important that they take ownership of it, that they believe in it, that they trust in it. So really and truly, every step of the way, whether our partners were communities or companies or the government, it was really important to present the solutions for them to see the benefits it could bring, but to really allow them to take lead and to feel like it was their own and to bring their ideas in as well, you know? So we were really adaptable and able to sort of modify our approaches based on the different projects' needs. And I also have to say a great thanks and to the IDB lab in particular, but just for the sort of agility it gave us to allow that type of flexibility to work with partners throughout the project, changing as we went. But certainly, if you want any solution to succeed and then also to continue when you're finished, it's really important that your partners take ownership of it, you know, and therefore them taking lead and having that kind of sense of ownership that it was their own and not our project was really important.
Thank you, Jonathan. Felipe.
Sí, nosotros creo que el principal.
Yes, I think that the main lesson that I would like to share is that we can't just try, but we need to try, and we must try to learn from our mistakes. This is fundamental. When we are children, we learn extensively from our mistakes. And in order for us to learn from our mistakes, we need to attach an adequate amount of humility. Clearly, we have to understand that we're going to make mistakes as we try to do things. This is part of human nature. We need to understand this on a very fundamental level. Now, we also need to be able to identify these weak spots, these blind spots, and think about how we can do things differently. How can we change what we do in the future to not commit the same mistakes again? I think these organizations that learn from their mistakes can be and are often more adaptable and better equipped to meet future challenges. So we need to understand that we make mistakes, but in order for us to learn from them, we need to think differently. And that's the key lesson that I'd like to share. Thank you. Thank you very much, Felipe. Juan Carlos? Very well. I think that for us, the lesson that we learned from this experience is that the people that need to understand the challenges that we face are the folks that work for the executing agency. In our case, we understood from the outset that we could do a virtual solution for some of these process management issues. And there's no success without people. And in this case, I have the opportunity and the pleasure to speak to all of you, but there were many who contributed to the success of this program over the course of these years. And the entire comptroller's office team in Colombia contribute enormously to the project. Diego Arisi and Francisco de Simone from the IDB and the other team members for the executing agency, Sandro Spina, Carlos Hernandez, Gabriela Velázquez, Javier Dorame. All of these people are superheroes who made this success story possible. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. I couldn't agree with you more. It takes more than a single person to be able to have superheroes. Thank you. And this takes me to Lourdes' team and her entire team who joins us from Uruguay. Hello, good afternoon. Well, the experience that I'd like to share relates to the involvement of our citizens in the project. When we offer them the opportunity to be a part of the solution, in this case, through these different local payment systems, but also through other outlets that are frequented by citizens wherever it is that they reside. And through these public-private interventions, we were able to garner participation for all citizens. And what we managed to do is transform the traditional role of the citizen as a mere spectator to becoming a key part of the change. And in this way, we were able to garner more trust in the project, and collectively, we were able to drive forward a solution that generates a positive impact for humanity in the environmental area. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, team from Uruguay. Lourdes, thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Juan Carlos, Jonathan. This has all been extremely fascinating and inspiring, listening to your stories and your lessons learned. For us, undertaking effective and efficient projects goes beyond merely meeting the goals set by indicators, but it's about programs that bring about real change and differences in people's lives, especially those that are most vulnerable. The needs continue to be extensive, and the resources continue to be more and more limited, because that is our ultimate objective, to improve lives. Let's not lose sight of this one fundamental fact. Now, for this purpose, we need more superheroes such as you, because you really do make a difference. You've taught us that with limited resources, with a mission, with a feeling of empowerment and a commitment to changing lives, we can be successful. So we will continue to look for more superheroes like yourselves. Thank you very much for joining us today. And until our next edition, thank you very much.